I am the giving tree in this situation.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Irenicast. I'm your host, Jeff, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Alan.
Heyo.
On the first and third Tuesday of every month, we bring to you our perspectives on theology and culture from a post-evangelical lens. Thank you for joining us for another conversation to provoke your progressive Christian imagination. This week, we are going to be talking about friendship, relationship, particularly, what is it? The word platonic? Platonic relationships, and how to engage that. And this conversation was pretty much guided to us by a post that we put on our Facebook page that really seemed to resonate with those of you that are following us on Facebook. So we'll talk about that. And then for our segment, we're going to do a top three, and we're going to do top three friends or duos in pop culture, literature, and just culture in general. So that's kind of the direction that we're headed in this episode. So about, I don't know, it's probably been about a month ago, Alan, who was our Facebook
Meme Lord,
right.
I'm not a meme lord, but yes, all for our sakes.
Yeah.
I am our meme lord.
We'll call Alan Lord Meme. And he finds all the great stuff that we put on Facebook, because I have a contentious relationship with memes, picture thingies on the interwebs. But it was a screenshot of a tweet, and it says, "Nobody talks about Jesus' miracle of having 12 close friends in his 30s. And this seemed to resonate with a lot of people, including us, which is why we posted it in the first place. But that is, the more and more I thought about it personally, the more and more I'm like, yeah, that is kind of a miracle, especially today and here. And I think for us, it represents a longing that we have, and seems to be reflective of a longing of more than just us, of a lot of people, especially people connected to this particular show. So we thought it would be a great idea to have an episode around this particular subject. Not a how-to guide. Let's get that out of the way real quick. We're not here we're not gonna give you a tutorial on how to make friends.
Make friends and influence people.
Exactly.
And get rich.
But talk about that longing and what it's meant for us, and invite all of you to share with what it's meant for you. So I
think that it's a cultural longing. I see the show Friends, and I see the show How I Met Your Mother as cries for help. It's like we long for something that we know is wrong, to have that kind of community and all the different characters that fit into our lives in different ways, but we don't have it. And all of us can relate to it. So I think I have some ideas as to why that is, but I don't want to jump the gun or anything. Is there anything else you need to set up for the conversation?
I think that's a good place to start. I don't think we need to necessarily explore why that is. I mean, we will culturally, but Alan, why is that true for you?
I think it's true for me because for some reason I'm shy. Yeah, I think in these conversations, it has to be about me, right? I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm shy about recognizing the purposes of my friendships. There's a video out there, School of Life or something, that talks about naming and recognizing the different purposes in relationships. And we almost feel like our relationships have to be like, I like you, and there's no other purpose for us being together than I just like you, right? Like that has to be what a friendship is. But there are different kinds of friends. You look at How I Met Your Mother. Do they all relate to each other in the same way? Does Robin fill that need for Ted the same way Barney does? No, they have like different. That's what's exciting. They all have different things coming to the table. And I think getting really clear about what we need, or what kinds of friendships we appreciate and what their purposes are for, might help us in the long run build better friendships. Because there are some people I'm friends with that I probably should just cut off, because there is like no purpose in even having the friendship that we do. I think we can probably all relate to that, right? People in our lives that we've been connected to that sometimes they're not even nice, sometimes they're not bought into your goodness in general, or they secretly want you to fail even, or something like that. And calling it what it is, being clear about boundaries and clear about the purpose of a friendship is helpful. So in this video I watched, there's friends who are collaborators. Jeff, you are my collaborating friend because we work together, right?
Right.
We have a purpose. And like this friendship it's really cool because we work on stuff together, and there's an element of that. There are different friends who are reassuring for us. They reassure us by sharing their stories of their failures or follies, and basically they show us compassion. I think in a Christian context of Saint Bridget in 5th century Celtic Christianity, she talked about the soul friend, the Anam Cara, someone who is a compassionate presence. But then there's those friends who are super fun. I think
before you move on, Alan, just real quick, I love that in a conversation about contemporary relationships, you found an obscure.
It's not obscure to me.
I just love that. Anyway, continue on.
When
Sorry.
I think about people who are reassuring friends, I think about soul friends. I studied Celtic Christianity as like a healing. I tried to heal my Western Christianity by studying Celtic Christianity, and I found it really life-giving. So anyway, look up Anam Cara. If you're
How I Met
it.
Your Mother and Celtic Christianity. There's the subtitle of this episode.
So I'm the weird friend who throws in weird facts and stuff. I know my place. Then there's other friends who help us clarify what we're thinking. Like that friend you talk to, and you're processing all this stuff, and they're listening to you and maybe mirroring back a little bit of what you're saying. And then they didn't say this in the episode, but I think of old friends, like people from your past when you're in high school or your former self. They help you keep a continuity in your life to remind you of who you were, where you came from, what you're doing now, to like introduce yourself to yourself almost. You know how when you hang out with your friends and you start acting like you used to, and it's really subtle or maybe really obvious? That's what those friends do for us. So each friendship has like a purpose to it. And it somehow seems unglamorous to kind of name it in our minds or recognize it, but clarifying why we hang out with people at least a little bit and being willing to set boundaries with people who may or may not even benefit or us benefit from spending time together like that. Maybe it's not as sexy or as TV show worthy, but that's probably why our friendships are so bonkers. You go to a dinner and people like, talk about different things, and somehow you just don't connect to stuff. Maybe it's because we don't have a purpose for why we are connected to the people that we're connected to.
Well, and I think that there's also a disjointed experience, right? Like if you are someone who lived in a town and then went off to college, most likely you're not going to end up back in your hometown. You're going to end up into another place outside of college if that's your trajectory. So that's one experience of relationships. And then you have all these like eras based on location in your life and relationships and how you've changed and how they've changed and keeping track of all that and then coming to a new place. And then you have people who they live in the same hometown most, if not their whole life. And they know, this person and that person. So you have all these different contexts, spaces of relationship that make things difficult the more often they change in your life. And how do you manage that? And that seems to be a relatively like modern invention, right? That's not been the case. At
least in the history of, people were more migratory a lot longer ago, but at least for us in the West, it's a newer invention because we used to have rooted communities, right? Where people grew up together. There's actually an interesting study that was done sometime in the 2000s, 2013, where they studied people's happiness with whether they had a lot of, investment in like a small group of close friends, or they invested their time in a wide group of friends who may be far away. And what they found was in cities where there's not a lot of mobility, where people just stay where they live, there's not a lot of moving in and out, it actually benefits a person's happiness to form bonds with a small group of really close friends. But in cities where there's a lot of mobility, people move in and out and they're transitional, happiness is actually directly correlated to having a wider group of people who live further away. So it's actually counterintuitive. We used to say like, have a small group of close friends because that's what matters. When in reality, I hated LA, dude. I lived, and if you live in LA and you love it, that's fantastic. For me, I grew up in a small town. Nobody came and went. Like I knew everyone growing up. And then moving to LA, it was like people are so transitional, moving constantly. And it just drove me nuts. But they say that your happiness is correlated to having a wider group of far away friends, which is really interesting.
That is interesting because that seems to be, I don't know. It seems to me, anecdotally at least, the widespread connection that we can have with all these people, there seems to be this desire to find a smaller niche. Especially in this space, this like middle ground progressive Christian space, there's a lot of talk of like finding my tribe and, finding my people and, trying in the midst of all these stories and all these voices that are out in the ether to try to find one that's more relatable to them. And I think that the problem there is like, how do you cultivate relationships that do push you and challenge you, that don't just keep you in the same place over and over again? I don't know. It's a complicated issue, but I think it's probably complicated for me and maybe for you, Alan, is by the very nature of our role as ministers, right?
Definitely.
Because it puts us in a different place where friendships are had to be always outside of our community in a certain way, or at least encouraged, where you can never be too vulnerable or too open with people in the church because you were in a specific place of leadership and you need to be above reproach or whatever you want to say.
Or on the other side of it, all the relationships are transactional.
Right.
I mean, you're getting something for the relationship that you have with people in your congregation, whether that's a job security or I don't know, or making your job easier, or that's a really cynical way to look at it. But
it's true. It's absolutely true.
I had a friend call me up randomly and they're like, I'm so tired of making all these connections with people. It's just all transactional all the time. I just want to contact people I really believe in what they're doing. And they strike me as really cool people. So let's have a conversation. And I was like, you know what? I love that. Maybe that's what I need to do. Find people that it's not a transactional thing, but I really connect with either what they're doing or them as people and invest in those connections. But
yeah, but even in that place, you found out about them from a place of like they're out there in some way, shape, or form. So it's just a reverse dynamic. All you're doing is reaching out to someone that you see as an authority or fun, and for them, it might be very much transactional.
Right.
So
I'm saying for me, I need to just find people that we all should be doing that and clarifying why we're doing what we're doing. You know what I mean? And rather than like being honest is, I guess, what I'm trying to arrive at. Being honest with why we're forming with ourselves too, why we form the relationships that we do. And also investing our time in people that are going to pour into us, or not even pour into us, that we just believe in what they're doing or in them as people. That's hard for me in ministry, because in ministry, you're supposed to love everybody, right?
Right. Like
regardless, you're supposed to be able to form these deep relational bonds with everyone in your congregation, everyone on the street who walks up.
Well, you were talking earlier about that kind of, from the video you saw, that floater, the person who's just in your life because of life circumstances that really you're an acquaintance with, but you don't have any real connection with. And when you really boil it down, they're just kind of a negative pull on your life. And most people can just be like, you know what, I just unfriend them and disconnect. And then over time, you just forget about it. But what if they were what if you were their pastor? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then what do? It's like, oh, I mean, I don't like this person, or where there's no connection. But I was their pastor. So what do I do?
Yeah. And that's why it's really important to be clear about pastoral boundaries. So it's not just about, forming friendships with people in your church or getting into intimate relationships being a bad thing. It's also protection for you and for them in the long run, So if you have to act like a friend to someone rather than their pastor, that never ends, right? When you leave, there's an expectation that you'll continue your friendship rather than a pastoral relationship. And so being friendly, being kind, but also being clear about who you are as a pastor actually benefits you in that way. And that's what I kind of mean by building boundaries with people. We rarely maintain good boundaries with other people in our work or in our orbit, right? When they're orbiting in our lives.
Right.
In that video, it says someone may secretly enjoy seeing you fail. Like they don't even necessarily know consciously, or maybe it's deep down somewhere in there, but they're still kind of in your life. Have you seen that? Speaking of memes, I guess I am a meme lord. That meme where there's a guy that says, I can't tell if that's true friendship or just really hateful. I've always loved that because it's so true. I think human beings have struggled with like, friendship requires kind of a vulnerability, right? There's a pushback sometimes, or a mirroring, and sometimes we don't like that mirror stuff to deal with our things with other people. And it's a tale as old as time. I think of some of the ancient wisdom that was given to the royal people in Proverbs, saying the wounds of a friend are faithful, the kisses of the enemy are deceitful. We struggle with recognizing why someone's in a friendship with us in the first place. Are they just entertaining us, are humoring us, or do they really like find a sort of connection? So navigating that stuff is serious business, and a lot of us don't want to spend the time actually doing it.
Right. And then
because we don't have the energy.
Right. And then there's a whole like culture to it, right? Like, I mean, the very fact that shows like How I Met Your Mother and Seinfeld exist means they're this rule or social convention rules that you have to account for in terms of like, well, do I interact this way or do I interact this way? And then if you have any semblance of insecurity, then that is like amplified a billion times, because then you're imposing what you think that person thinks about you. And there's all the anxiety that goes with that, the more complex the culture is.
And the only way that I found to decrease that anxiety is to be clear about what I want and need and the boundaries I'm setting up. And that's it. And just expect other people to do the same. Because you can't control what other people think or do or how they're going to respond to you. You can only control what you put out there. We did talk before the recording about people who try to look at the Bible as a roadmap to friendship or something like that. And you had a concern that maybe it's not the greatest roadmap or
well, I think for that very reason, right? Like relationships change based off of culture. So obviously you can take the central themes of, you know, what the Bible says about relationship, caring for one another, putting people's needs before yours, but not in a way that's damaging to you, but in a way that's self-aware of the things that you actually need and the things that you're just holding on to, whatever. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation also, but you can't cut and paste it. And I think that maybe if a lot of us have grown up in church as far what a friendship is, right? The number one rule is it has to be a Christian, because if they're not a Christian, then it'll never be as good of a friendship than any other friendship that you have. If in fact,
it didn't even occur to me to talk about that in this episode.
It was
right.
Well, it was vilified even, like a non-Christian friend or non-Christians. I was even told once should only be acquaintances until you've led them to the Lord. And then
I was taught that too. We were taught, do not be unequally yoked. That's what was said in youth group. And yoked being the piece of wood on two oxen that are going through the field plowing. You don't want to be yoked together, bound together with a non-believer, because they're going to lead you astray into non-Christian stuff.
Right. Which, you know, prevented a lot of like friendships that you could have or maintain, or ruined a lot of friendships. I remember in junior high having a conversation with, and I was kind of I wouldn't say I was an outcast, but I was definitely a loner. I was a little bit shy. The classes that I had, most of the people in those classes were from a different elementary school, so they already all knew each other, and I wasn't the kind of personality that was going to jump in there. So I made this really good friend, a little bit of an outsider like me, and we'd have these good conversations and stuff like that. And eventually, you know, the idea of Christianity came up because I was in youth group and all that kind of stuff. And I remember, you know, so here's a kid who's already isolated, just like me, already feeling like a little bit off from the rest of where everyone is. And he asked me a question about, you know, if I die tomorrow, am I going to go to hell? And I was like, yeah. Looking back, I ostracized him from like life in general, right? Because this particular way that I was taught that people need to know the truth was so prominent and so pushed forward. And it ruined that relationship. We really didn't talk that much after. Even if I believed in a literal hell, like there doesn't always have to be an immediacy in that relationship. You can take your time. You can get to know someone. You can just develop that over time and see where things happen. I think that a lot of times we're looking for that immediate connection, right? It's like the relational equivalent of the altar call, where you go to the altar and God heals you and it's done and you're in this new era of life, as opposed to this progress, this movement forward slowly but surely. And maybe there's a time where you're disconnected and then you reconnect. And
so both of us have rethought, just to clarify, both of us have rethought our beliefs and feelings on hell, for sure. And we've talked about it in previous episodes. But what you're talking about is this evangelical need to make all of life about heaven and hell decisions. Like you wake up in the morning and you're like, this shirt, am I going to go to heaven or hell? You know, like it slowly takes over everything in life. Whereas there are adolescent friendships that should be about friendships in school and stuff. And
right.
Just kind of life in general, rather than, you know, witnessing at every moment, are you going to go to hell? So you you've relegated normal life and normal friendships and relationships to a second tier of your existence. So it took your isolation and made it even more isolating because it dehumanized you and your friendships and stuff, because that stuff didn't matter as much. And it isolated that other kid, right? So it's a self-replicating kind of thing.
Well, it's that every aspect of all your relationships had eternal consequences, right? So it made the and even when we talked, in terms of the Bible and all that kind of stuff, there's always that verse that we brought up about like foolish talk. Like if it didn't have purpose or meaning, then it was meaningless and you shouldn't engage in that. And I remember having this like really pretentious moment when I came back from this missions trip, right? So I was on the high and mighty, like, well, I went to a foreign country and I helped people. And I remember we were sitting down as a group of friends and we were talking about stupid things. And I was frustrated. And I said, why do we always have to talk about this? What about the real stuff in life? You know what I mean? Like, why are we talking about something real? And it was just this real douchey moment for me. Like, it was not reading the room at all. This was the moment was supposed to be made for. And
it
not
was your
every
evangelical moment.
Right. Everything doesn't have to have a dire consequence. And I think that dire consequence is also underlining some of that need of like, well, I have to have a good friendship. Like, so we put so much pressure and stuff into it that it never really fully materializes because it has to be a certain way.
Man, there's so much to comment on that. I mean, culture in general does that. Watching How I Met Your Mother does that. Like, our friendships need to be as epic as a Barney or something. Or the sad thing that I think about in dividing up your friends between Christian and non-Christian, and you're not supposed to fraternize with the enemy or the people who are not Christian. It isolates you not just from people, but also from ideas. So when you're a kid,
absolutely.
And you're growing up and learning, and you're supposed to be discovering the world, it isolates you from different ways of thinking. And that creates an entire life of saying that sealing yourself off from different perspectives is more important than people. That's kind of how I internalized it, is that it was more important that I'm not exposed to the bad ways of being in the world than it is to form friendships with people who don't think like me. So those people matter less. They matter less than my ideological purity. That's creepy as hell.
Well,
think about that. You're telling
damaging.
Teenagers your ideological purity is more important than the people around you.
Right. And I think that that's a message across any group that's super niche, right? Like, or any unhealthy group that's super niche, where it's like all about you're this particular person and you can only associate with these kind of people. Like, it happens obviously it happens in Christianity. You see it happen in certain like internet cultures, like gamer cultures, or even like fan cultures, right? Like the whole, I just recently saw Ready Player One, but this whole thing is like, if you're a fan of this is exactly how you have to be a fan of it. And if you're not, then we're going to ostracize you completely from this, because your connection to the people in this common group is all about the ideology. It's all about the thought. It's all about the notion of what this is supposed to be. And that's what your entire relationship is predicated on. And I think that was maybe the struggle for a lot of people after you move out of a church context where it's a given and you're just going to be connected and you have that ideology. But once you separate from that ideology, then you're separating from the people, and you realize that whole time that you have to not only recontextualize the things that you believe, but you have to recontextualize your relationships, which is even harder and creates a permanent divide, and then creates an anxiety the next time you want to engage a culture. Am I really being engaged for myself, or am I here because I meet the standards of this particular ideology, and as soon as I don't believe this or am part of this anymore, then I'm ostracized. And that's a difficult place to be in. But we're all guilty of it, right? How many times are we really confused on how to handle a relationship that we had so much in common, but that person changes? And how do we maneuver through that personally? So I think it's understandable, but I don't think that there are a lot of places that have the fortitude or self-awareness to really stop and evaluate, okay, when I get to that place, how do I then maneuver that? Like, when is it okay that the relationship drifts apart because of the ideology? And when are we putting stuff forward to actually actively ostracize someone because the ideology changed? And that's tough. That's tough to be self-aware of, because you want to believe you're doing it for the right reasons.
It's also hard to love people outside of their ideology as people, and then to watch that stuff separate your relationship. So what I'm hearing is that, because of this meme and stuff, having friends when you're in your 30s is hard enough as it is. Being an ex-evangelical makes it a million times harder because you're leaving this community and you've had these experiences. And being a minister has its own unique things that make it even more difficult, but everyone can relate to it. Have you ever heard of Dunbar's number? It's a concept by Robin Dunbar in the 90s that you can only have a certain number of friends. Have you heard of this before? That there's like a natural limit to your friend.
I've heard that. Yeah, I didn't hear it labeled as a Dunbar number, but yeah.
So there's a specific number. I guess in the 90s he used primates, like their groupings and stuff, and the size of their brain. This is like spotty science in my mind, but whatever. He looked at primates and the size of their brains and how many relationships they had, and then he like extrapolated, thinking, well, human brains are bigger, so they should be able to have more connections. And so he came up with a certain number. Sociologist, I know that sounds funny.
I was thinking more in terms of like you only have so many hands to pick lice off the head of your friends.
Yeah. You can only nutritionally support a certain number of primates. So he said 150. It's possible for a human being to have like the upper limit is 150. Sociologists came after the fact and have provided different numbers. I've seen as high as 290. And he said that the definition of this kind of friendship is the kind of person you would not feel embarrassed about joining uninvited for a drink if you happen to bump into them at a bar. So if you just walk into a bar and you bump into someone and it's like you're actually good enough friends that you wouldn't be embarrassed to just sit down next to them. And what are the chances that we're going to find 150 people that fit super well with us and we're going to have great relationships with? The numbers dwindle. We're not capable of. It's frustrating for all of us because we're not capable of creating what we want, of finding those people. It's hard. It's hard to find people we have things in common with. And that not only do we care about their good, they care about ours in a mutually beneficial way. That's what the strength of a relationship is.
That's super tough. Honestly, I find that when I meet new people, like when I really try to engage, I find that I'm just asking questions and that there's never like, well, what about you? And I'm like, how one-sided is this? But I keep going because I'm like, I don't know. Like, do you know how to ask questions? Do you care not to ask questions? Like, I just find it incredibly frustrating. My wife and I have had this conversation on a regular basis for years. Probably for the last 5 years.
Yeah, because I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, we're trying to show interest when we're meeting people, and we're meeting new parents because when you're a parent, you have kid stuff and you run into people, and we find that and then you can't help but after a while be like, all right, is there something wrong with us? Like, do I smell? Is my what is my
insecure because they're not showing interest in you?
It's super hard. I haven't felt this insecure.
Do you remember
since I was in junior high. As a parent, it's incredibly disheartening to be like, oh, is there something wrong with me? I don't know. It's weird.
Do you remember what Mona said? So you made that comment years ago on this podcast. And I do not, you won't even be able to find it. I promise.
I couldn't remember the episode.
She said she ran into the same thing, even in dating. She was dating and, doing the online thing, and she would meet people and they just wouldn't ask anything. So she started offering information about herself, and she just told herself people don't know how to ask questions and don't know how to show interest, which is, I think, true. I think we've lost some sort of ability to interact with people. Maybe we could, say it's a societal shift or technology or whatever, but I think kind of the easiness of being friends and talking face to face and stuff is getting harder for all of us. So you know what? It's not a miracle that Jesus had 12 friends, in ancient times, because they were good at talking to each other. It's only a miracle because we're the weird ones in humanity that isolate ourselves and live alone and stuff.
Maybe. I don't know. It just feels weird, right? Because then I can't put myself in a place of being I don't want to offer information. Then I feel like that's just weird, You know what? You know what
it is? Mastery of languages. Just go with me on this. To master a language, you have to be like a kid. Rosetta Stone did a lot of research, and they see that kids are willing to experiment and mess up over and over and over. But when they make a mistake, it doesn't like negatively hit on their learning process. When adults go to learn a language, they make a mistake and they're like, oh man, I got that wrong. They have like an internal dialogue about it. Kids, they just move right along and try again over and over. So the key to learning language is to experiment constantly and to not let your mistakes ruin the whole process. With friends, you have to be able to put yourself out there and get rejected and it not negatively affect your search for friends. So offering information about yourself, being that kind of person or doing whatever is really putting yourself out there. But it's almost like you got to keep doing it. I had a clergy friend who talked to me about relationships when I started dating again. And he's like, you got to put your shoes on. You just like, you got to get out there. You just got to meet people because, you know, it's not going to be solved itself. You have to start doing it. So I think being friends to people and opening up or engaging people or offering stuff about yourself, you just got to try it, experiment, do it over and over, even if you're going to experience rejection.
Yeah.
And
see,
that's what we fear.
Yeah. And and that's the tough part, right? Because it's not just work to get friends, but then it's work to maintain friends. And you're kind of like, well, which one do I do? I have a friend of mine who was on one of my youth staffs who is a wonderful person. And and she would always say, like in terms of like getting to know people, she's like, why? I have friends. Like she's just like satisfied with, no, this is what I have. Like, why? I don't need new friends. Like, don't try to be my friend. Just the way that you said it with just this assertiveness,
That's awesome.
It's a sentiment that's hard not to, you know, grab onto sometimes because you're like, man, this is exhausting. Like trying to like initiate some kind of connection, and I can't imagine having the added layer of like doing that with romantic relationships and trying to maneuver through that. But gosh, it's like, man, okay, maybe I should just retreat to the friends that I have and put my efforts there.
Well, we're not motivated. So the it's funny. We all recognize in that meme, like, God, we really wish we had better friends, but it's going to take more work than the payoff is probably going to give us. Cause the payoff is like getting to know people and then like not really caring about them or being hurt by them or rejected or whatever. So we're basically sitting on the couch looking at memes on Pinterest of working out and thinking it would be such a great idea to go work out, you know? And you're like, no, the payoff's not going to be good. I don't want to do all the work put into it.
Well, then there's the flip side is someone really feels connected to you and you're like,
That's what I mean.
Yeah, not so much.
So what I mean when I say work, this is the scenario I envision in my head. You just hit it, nail on the head. Say I make a connection with someone and they really care about me and they really like me, but I don't like them. It's going to be work and emotional work that is taxing as hell to put boundaries up, to say like, hey, it's really nice to meet you, but no, I don't want to meet up. It's like, so like that kind of, and that's what I started this conversation with. You have to be brutally honest about your feelings if you're going to start building good, lasting, meaningful relationships. You can't just like pretend things are great or fill your life with all these like relationships that seem great, but they're really not. Like just be honest about where you're at and unapologetic about where you're at and be a kind person, of course. That takes a lot of
that's the balance that people have a tough time with, right? Like being honest and setting boundaries in a kind way or still feeling like you're kind. Because I think that's the problem. It's not that you're not being kind. You're being more kind by setting boundaries than you're not, but it's that feeling of, oh no, I didn't want them to feel this way or we have this weird sense of politeness.
You're scared that you're going to meet someone that you have to do that with. And that makes sense because I feel that too, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, that's never an issue of not getting to know someone. I don't know why. Like maybe I'm just fine with ghosting people. But you know, to me, like, and again, this is, I think part of this is such like a personalized experience, right? So each of us, you and I probably have more in common in this experience because of the nature of our position, right? You can't ghost a congregant member or whatever.
You can. It
doesn't work out so well. Yeah. But it's so like my motivation for the work is just trying to make that connection. And then once you make that connection, then the work of following up and building on it. And to me, it doesn't even enter in my mind in that initial connection that, what if this person ends up being like weird and, cause I don't know, because I guess maybe for me, the payoff is always worth it compared to when I can connect with someone and develop that relationship. That it's not a big deal in the leading up, but then it becomes like a exhausting after.
Think about the people who really poured, and I'm saying this to everyone, not just you. Think about the people who have really like made relationship worth it. Maybe you only have like one or two people that come to mind, but think about how good that is and how much you treasure that. And like, remember, it is worth it to risk. It is worth it to look like an idiot, to be the one that gets rejected, or to say something stupid, or to share too much. I think it's always worth it. You just have to do it over and over.
I don't know if I fully agree with that, in the sense that I'm fine with not oversharing. So maybe that's my anxiety leading up to it, is that I just want to make sure, am I sharing too much? Am I not sharing enough? And maybe holding back a little bit and trying to, although I feel like if I'm asked questions, I'm pretty, like, right. I'm not the type of person that'll say yes, no, maybe. There's that one time, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not short answers. Like, I just feel like if I get someone to engage, then it's more comfortable for me, because I feel like, okay, I've been invited in. To me, a question is an inviting in of, and I guess I'm like a social vampire, right? Like, I'm not going to enter in unless I'm invited, because I just, and I think that's attributed to like my shyness with maybe new people that I mention, unless I'm entering the place into authority. Maybe that's why I was attracted to being in ministry, because if I go to a church and I'm in a place of that, then I feel like I have more confidence to move into that place. But if it's a level playing field, I feel like I have to be invited.
That's why my family's so friendly, is we don't feel like we do. We feel like everybody's family, and just nobody's a stranger. My grandpa never met a stranger, which has its own, ups and downs or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure family dynamics are a big reason on the why we don't approach social situations in different ways.
I've noticed, just like one last comment for me on something you said earlier. You talked about being asked questions. I've been on the opposite side of that equation, where I ask people questions about their lives just out of curiosity, and I show interest in their lives at like almost every point in my day, and people are routinely surprised. Almost always. They're surprised that someone sees them as a human being or cares. Like, say I'm at a checkout line in Target or something, and I'm like, hey, how long have you been on for today? Like, how long have you been working today, kind of thing. How long have you been here for? And they're almost always like, oh, it's 6 hours. And then their total demeanor changes, because suddenly they're a human being with like a story and needs and like reasons for the things that they do, rather than looking at them like a machine. And it's sad that it's oddly refreshing when people show an interest in them.
Right.
That's a tragedy.
Just as refreshing when people reciprocate that interest, because usually it stops there.
There's no hurt there. Like I said, friends is a cry for help.
It is.
That's where I'm at.
It is. Well, we want to hear we are inviting you into the conversation. We want to hear what you think, because we know that our framework for friendship is somewhat niche because of our place in life and because of our like family dynamics, but most importantly because of our position in leadership. So we'd love to hear from you. You can go to the show notes at irenicast.com/116. That's at irenicast.com/116, or comment on our Facebook page. Or if you go to our website, you'll see a little red bar that you click on. You can record your thoughts about friendships and your longing for them, or how you've maintained them, or give us some advice on how we can approach these different things, and really, join the conversation for this particular episode.
Yeah, if you ever wanted to be on a podcast, this is your opportunity.
Yeah.
Record yourself talking. Tell us something about friendships. You could read a poem about friendships. That would be super cool. Or tell us about a friendship that just meant a lot to you and why it did. And we're going to splice that stuff together, and we'll share it with everyone. So
absolutely,
go record something.
Yeah, this is a platform that we want to, like we've talked about, cultivate story, like legitimately cultivate story.
You're being invited in, like a vampire.
Exactly.
Come, I was going to say suck blood or something, but that doesn't seem appropriate.
No, it doesn't. Unless it's in the context of communion.
Oh my God.
So lend your voice to this conversation, and then always in the show notes, you'll find all the ways you can reach the show and us individually and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to continue this theme of friendship, and on the other side of the music, we're going to do a top 3, and we'll be doing top 3 duos or groups in anything, like real life, media, literature, all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. So every now on the show for our segment, we like to do a top 3 just to kind of let people know a little bit about the things that we're interested in. And we thought it would be a good thematic link to do our top 3 famous like friends or duos or groups in, we talked a lot about How I Met Your Mother and all that kind of stuff. And, there's certain comedic duos or dramatic duos that we really connect with. So we'd figured we'd give our top 3. So Alan, let's start with you. Let's just get right into it.
I think we're going to have this one is going to be the same. I think the other 2, I've got my own, but this one, I think you've written down probably too, because everyone has to. It's a better love story than Twilight. Turk and JD from Scrubs.
That's an honorable mention for me. It just missed out on my top 3.
Oh, they're so the love between those guys, the shared silliness, the shared collaboration when they're working on things, because one's a surgeon and one's a medical doctor, and sometimes I would say 90% they're just being goofy all the time, and then 10% they're actually collaborating on stuff. But they're great. I love it. That imaginative friendship.
It is. It is a good one.
Like bromance.
Yes, the almost maybe the stereotypical or the textbook bromance, Turk and JD. I remember, I think it was like the 2nd or 3rd season after Turk comes home from his honeymoon, and like JD sees him from the window, and he's down at the bottom floor of the hospital, and then like it's like just 5 minutes of them running all over the hospital and peeking out at different windows
and trying to find each other.
I love it. It's so great.
That the thing about their friendship that I love is JD's neediness, because like that plays off so well in their relationship.
So that would be you in the relationship?
Maybe. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's a good one. Just missed my top 3. I agree with that. Coming into this, I picked mine. I tend to overthink these things because obviously I'm a big fan of pop culture, movies, television, talk about it all the time. Started another podcast doing that. Like this is my place, right? You will mention obscure theologians from, the 5th century or whatever, and I will mention obscure references to some.
Bridget's legit, dude.
Obscure maybe to the uninformed, like myself.
Okay.
And I'll do the same thing with pop culture, like television, movies, whatever. So when I approached this, I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like do the whole, what's it called when you say something? Free association? No. Where you just say it and like first thing that comes to your mind, and then you just say it. So these are all like the things that just popped out. So the first one for me is Rob and Big. Rob Dyrdek and Big Black.
Nice.
Rest in peace. And I'm not a skater. I don't know anything. Like I typically didn't even like MTV shows or whatever, but for some reason I started watching this show because of a youth student that said, hey, you should check this out. And I fell in love with it. It's just random quasi reality show of this pro skater and his bodyguard and all the random adventures they have. And their relationship. And I mean, the whole theme song is like, let me tell you about my best friend. And I always think of them when I think of like fun duos that I'd want to like hang out with and be a part of.
They are the definition of fun. Both of those guys. They're fantastic together. That's true. Is that early 2000s? It just sounds early 2000s. A pro skater and his bodyguard form an unlikely friendship.
Right? Oh, no. It was 2006 was the first episode.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Well, that makes me feel a little less old. That's nice. That's a nice surprise. But yeah, I love it.
That was 12 years ago.
I know. But I guess at some point they had a falling out in real life, and then when Rob Dyrdek started his other show, I think it was in the 3rd season, they reunited, and there were some good times. I think it was called Fantasy Factory or something like that. So, but Rob and Big, I have fond memories of that show. I haven't watched it in a while, but I love that duo. So that's my number 3, Rob and Big.
That's great. My number 2, I identify a little bit with JD, but this person is, I think out of all the duos in existence, this is who I am the most. And it may surprise you. I don't know. Frodo and Samwise Gamgee.
Oh, yes.
Lord of the Rings.
Wait, are
I
you
feel
Frodo
like
or Samwise? Okay, yeah.
Samwise. I love everyone needs a Samwise, dude. I mean, he's always trying to talk sense into Frodo, right? Like telling him not to be risky, trying to like keep him back in the Shire, but goes along anyway and cares about him. And it's always like that. Really, you always need that really good friend that really has your best interest in mind, you know. And you have to kind of convince to do all the risky stuff, but they're just gold on the inside.
They're right there. So every single friendship sermon I gave as a youth pastor, I used the last scene of Lord of the Rings to illustrate it every time, where he like goes after him in the water and they hops in the boat and they go off for the rest of the 2 movies. Every time I use that clip, I have it still on my computer, ready to go for an illustration if I ever wanted to use it.
You know what? We're recording this before this Sunday. I'm going to use it this Sunday. So I was going to talk about relationships and friendships and stuff. And creating community.
It's a wonderful scene.
I'm going to use it.
That. Thanks, and Jeff. Then the third movie where he's like, he carries him up Mordor.
Yes.
Those 2 scenes right there, I think are like.
Those 2 scenes are fantastic.
Got to use them.
Yeah. So I think of Samwise Gamgee. Plus I love that actor because I grew up watching Rudy. Where he,
that's a generational divide right there. I think of him in terms of Mikey from the Goonies, and you think Rudy.
So I did see Goonies a few times as a kid, but Rudy was our like family movie. So
I hate that movie so much.
He's like, an underdog. So I rewatched it, and I did not like it. And I told my family, and that was a really big mistake.
Oh, no.
Honestly, like I said crazy things over the years, right? I used to be evangelical, and now I'm this crazy liberal, whatever. And I talk to my family, and I'm always unabashed, and I love everybody and love sharing myself. I've never had... See, even my dog's upset. I've never had as much judgment from anyone in my family as when I said Rudy wasn't that good. I said it while we're eating, and literally everybody stopped. They dropped forks and stuff and looked at me, and I was like, dude...
Yeah, it's amazing to me. Like, even personalities that I'll follow on Twitter, or even myself, the vitriol that comes if you trash someone's pop culture icon is way worse than if it's like you're attacking them politically or anything else. Just the
make fun of my mom,
come out, right?
Not my movies, man.
Right, exactly. So what you're telling me is your family would rather you lose your relationship with Jesus than not like Rudy anymore.
Yeah. Oh. They're like, we can kind of put up with him, you know, being liberal and reading the Bible differently and stuff and voting maybe third party, but definitely not giving up on Rudy.
Right. But don't trash a movie about a little man who's patronized by an entire team.
Totally. Not just patronized, but like, dude. Oh, man, that was rough.
Yeah. Not a fan of that movie. And I get why some people like it, but to me, it was just like, yeah. Anyway, all right. My number 2 is a real life duo that I have all good memories of that have collaborated across many different things, and it is Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. Started on the news together on SNL. They've done a couple movies together, and anytime they are on screen, I love it. Especially when they did the whole like Sarah Palin, Hillary Clinton thing a few years back. To me, like the ultimate duo right there.
The reason I like them, now that you say that, is that they're both so confident and well-defined in who they are on their own that their comfortability together is just great. You know what I mean? You could take either one of them and put them on the camera, and they're this like really confident, well-versed comedic actress. But together, it's like they know that they're both like that. So their friendship is one of like mutuality. Like they're real peers, you know? They're comfortable with each other. I love those two.
Right. It's a good one.
Think of that.
It's a beautiful thing.
One. So my top one, you ready for this? Top duo of pop culture of all time. The Giving Tree and The Little Boy.
Oh. I've never even seen it. I don't even know.
You never read The Giving Tree?
No.
The one where this kid in childhood befriends a tree and climbs in her trunk and swings from her branches and carves like his name into her like trunk or whatever, like me plus T, which stands for tree. And he like eats her apples and stuff.
Oh, I've never read it, but
And then as he grows older, he comes back and like he spends less time with the tree, but he just shows up every now and then. And he's like, hey, I need one of your branches to build, something. And then slowly cuts down the tree as he grows older to take everything from her until he's this old man. And the tree's like always giving parts of itself. Then he needs to sell money for for the apples. He needs to build a house from the branches, a boat from her trunk, and then it always says with every page that the tree was happy.
That's your number one? That's awful. The reason I know about that is because I've never read it personally, but my wife recently was having a conversation with her mother about that tree because they read it when she was a kid, and she was getting ready to read it to the girls, and she was like, "This is awful. Like, I don't want my kids learning this." That seems so awful to me.
And so finally, she can't give anything left to the old man, right? Because she's already given everything. And so all he wanted at that point in his life, he didn't need anything from her. He just needed a quiet place to sit and rest. And so it says the tree was happy when he sits down on her as an old man. And the reason I love that duo is because it's a cautionary tale for every relationship in my life.
Whoa. It just got I'm glad that I'm going last. I don't want to end on that one.
You don't want to end on that note because Alan was happy that we were, Jeff. Alan was happy.
Oh man,
dude, a lot of my relationships have been codependent in the past, and I've talked about that. But like, the tree's happy every time the boy uses something, and has no need and no reciprocity. And
what? Sad. Yeah, it is very sad. It's not. Oh, and I'm sure that that's framed as like the ultimate sign of love or whatever,
sign of love over time, that you still are great friends even though you don't, and you're always giving. What I think, honestly, when I read that book, though,
that's abuse.
I think about parents and children, like your kids constantly. You're supporting them, right? Like physically, financially,
right? But like way. Towards a path of independence, not like towards a path of lifelong self-reliance.
It is toward a path of independence because the kid stops showing up unless he needs something.
No. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And then you sit on their tombstone, the inheritance that you get from your
I'm with my wife ancestors. On that one. That is not fun. Oh man. Wow, Alan,
hey, you didn't say top good duos. You just said top duos.
True. Okay. Touche. I'll give you that. I should have clarified. I should have known better than
you should have known better. This is on you, dude.
It is.
I'm gonna if I have the opportunity.
I am the giving tree in this situation.
I feel like that should be a clip that gets played on every episode from now on. Jeff, you should make a shirt we should make a shirt that says that and sell it on our website. I am the giving tree in this situation. I'm going to make that shirt. I'm going to do it. That's good stuff. Well, Jeff, I'm sorry you have to be the giving tree. Give us one last piece of goodness by telling us your top duo of all time.
Okay. So I had a tough time with this one, but I'm going top duo, and I'm gonna list my honorable mentions after because I have a little long list of them. But
why don't you list them before?
Okay, here are my honorable mentions. Okay. So my honorable mentions are Craig and Smokey from the movie Friday, Cheech and Chong, Batman and Superman, Turk and JD, like I mentioned before, and then Troy and Abed from Community. Those are my honorable mentions. But my number one, Shawn and Gus from Psych.
Yeah,
is my number one duo. Just hours of entertainment for me. If you've never seen it before, it might not age super well, but it's still really funny, good comedy. Came around around the same time as Monk on the USA Network. It's all streaming on Amazon Prime if you're interested or if you've seen it. But Shawn and Gus, I love the duo. To me, that's like, when we have this long conversation about like longing what you want friendships to be, just that like mischievousness of like a good relationship where you get into trouble with each other and all that kind of stuff. It's so funny. And then all the references are like geared towards my, I don't know, age group or pop culture influence era or whatever you want to call it. But Shawn and Gus from Psych, my absolute favorite duo of all time.
Almost as good as the Giving Tree, the little boy.
Oh man,
pretty close.
No, it's subjective.
Hey,
but
that's the most memorable duo of all time. You ask any of our listeners, you put a poll up, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I remember the Giving Tree because I was scarred by it as a child."
I'd be curious to find out what other people's favorite duos are. So if you're listening, let us know on any one of our platforms that we mentioned before. So I think that'll do it for us this week. Alan, how can people find you on the interwebs?
Tonight, I am doing the Intersections thing. This episode's being posted on Tuesday, April 17th, and starting at 6:30 p.m. at the Monk Cellar in Roseville. If you are an ex-evangelical or an unfundamentalist type in your spirituality, or maybe you're going through a process of figuring out where you're at and you want other people to talk to about that, we're meeting up and having a little bit of food. This week we're discussing the duality that comes from sacred and secular, being told like the self or the body or whatever it is bad and God is good, and there's a split between that, and how for some of us struggling to see ourselves as essentially good, like a part of creation and creation being particularly good, helping us move in better and more healthy ways. Join us 6:30, and then afterward you can feel free to have a beer with me or just get to know me a little bit, and we can talk. So that'll be happening tonight.
And if you are not in that particular area, we have an episode on the sacred and the secular that you can check in the show notes. I don't remember it offhand, but check the show notes and you can participate in spirit.
Love it.
And all of Alan's other information is in the show notes, all the ways to follow him. You can follow me on all the socials at Jeff Manildi, and on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, you can listen to my other podcast, Divine Cinema, where we talk about movies with themes of faith. And we actually took a break last month, and we're coming back this Thursday, and you can check it out then. So, and as for Irenicast, if you enjoy what you hear, recommend us to a friend or leave a rating and review on any platform that you are listening on. We would really appreciate it. You'll hear a lot of other podcasts say it helps them in their rankings and all that kind of stuff. But more than anything, we just want to hear from you. We just want to know that we're resonating in some way with our listeners. And if you want to take your support of the show to the next level, consider going to irenicast.com/Amazon before you make your next purchase. And then just shop as usual. Using that link will receive a small percentage of your purchase without any extra cost to you. That'll help us a little bit in covering some of the costs associated with the podcast. That's irenicast.com/Amazon. So for this week, I'm Jeff, the social vampire.
I'm Alan, your soul friend forever.
I was hoping you'd go Lord meme. Anyway.
Lord and the Lord meme.
Exactly.
It's not creepy. It's not creepy at all.
Not at all. Not at all. Thanks for joining the conversation.